Hello and welcome to the final week of my Prolongevity course, and normally I'd be sat with Graham Phillips, and unfortunately due to the lockdown we're going to have to do a final review via a remote video link. Graham, how are you doing?
Hi, John. Yeah, well, I'm trying to have a bit of rest and relaxation today. As you know, in between this, I've been running the pharmacies, which has been a whole other story. But hey-ho,
Yeah.
we just have to keep going, don't we?
Okay, so let's just treat this like a normal review.
Sure. So just reflecting on the last 2 to 4 weeks, I can see a supreme change in your overall blood glucose control. But blood glucose, of course, is only part of the story. It's just a symptom. So how are you finding it? Where do you think you are now?
I think I'm in a much better place. Obviously, there's been significant weight loss. I think one of the things I'm very proud of, I actually had to get a special belt reducing or hole cutting device, because you can see that's where I was when I started. I was right on the very end, and I had a very embarrassing video with you in the studio where my pot belly was all too present, and I've had to cut this extra one here, so that's a good 6 inches by my reckoning, and I've lost about 1 3/4 stone over the sort of it's a 10 weeks, 2 weeks of assessment, so it's really 8 weeks.
I can certainly see at least 2 chins lighter than you were before.
Well, you said you get rid of the double chin. I don't think I'm quite there yet, because looking at it, I feel like I've now learned how my body machine works.
Yeah.
And I've been very, very scared of going onto fad diets and then finding it too tough and coming off. And now I've just moved into something that I can see we can have as our lifestyle for as long as I'm on this planet, really. So that's I think an epic, really, because I know behavior change is very, very difficult to actually instill.
So do you feel that you can sustain this? Because if you can't, I have failed you.
I think that we definitely are on this for life, and I can speak with confidence because it's been a husband and wife team, and I think Sue's played a big part of this. So before I actually started the course, I sat down with her and said, look, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Will you support me? And she came along on the very first trip, and she's been there with a sharp, pointy stick, but she's changed the whole households. We had a big clear out of the cupboards, and she's made a huge effort to change all of our cooking and allowed me to experiment. So, I think so.
I get the impression that she's had some sort of buy one, get one free benefits as well.
Well, she lost pretty much the same amount of weight. She wasn't overweight anyway, but she's had a lot of benefits. She does a lot of dog walking and cycling, and she noticed with the cycling her joints weren't aching, and simple things like that. So, she's generally had similar benefits because we've both adopted the same lifestyle.
And I often see that. So if I can possibly embrace the family rather than one individual from the family, I try to do that. And I see that once the whole family adopts the principles, even if they're not officially on the course, they get 60 or 70% of the benefit. So that's kind of a great result for me.
Yeah, and I think the benefits are quite significant, because if we list them, I'll try and memorize them. I think I sent you a note with them so you can pick them up. First of all, obviously the weight loss. Secondly, you discovered that I had hypertension as a condition. So whenever I got very stressed, I went into an extremely dangerous state. I did go onto medication for the first time in my life. I've halved that medication. I suffered from things like blurry-eyed vision, and I thought it was because my prescription for my glasses was out of date. But that was happening in the evenings, and that is a very good sign that your blood pressure is really hammering the veins in the back of your eyes, and that could have been very, very nasty. I've got rid of Hunger pangs, craving for food after I've had a Chinese, it's just ridiculous.
No.
I've got rid of psoriasis. I've got rid of snoring, which Sue is very, very thankful for. I've basically, I think a lot of the things, itchy skin, stuff that the pharmaceutical industry makes a whole packet. I watch TV adverts now and I see, do you suffer from itchy and flaky skin? And here's a cream. And they're just treating symptoms. They're not actually treating a root cause, which is probably a metabolic syndrome, which is a whole new science I knew nothing about. I think understanding the chemistry, having the real-time monitoring to actually plot and see the effect on me as an individual, because I met a type 2 diabetic type 1 diabetic that went to a conference, and he said there's 1,000 of us there and we all have different meals and we all use the same device as you, John, and we all come out with different readings.
Absolutely,
so to understand that the human biome is very individual and have this ability over the 8 weeks to experiment and to find out what's good and not so good, and where you can have a little bit of leeway where it's only tripping you slightly into a sugar spike, but overall it's beneficial. All of that's been good. Being able to get back to exercise, because when I found I was hypertensive, I discovered that obviously that could have caused a stroke or a heart attack, and your counsel was very, very important in me not rushing back into the gym or onto my bike, which was my usual tactic to try and lose a few pounds. And I've done 2 this week 15-mile bike rides, and
wow,
pretty effortless. I've come out hardly sweating and feeling like, yeah, I can do that, it's not a problem. So that's, I don't know, did I miss any of the benefits I listed to you?
Well, there are 2 things for me, right? The most important benefit is the look in your eyes, right? When we first met, I saw a very, very tired, exhausted person, and your eyes just demonstrated that. You've kind of got the sparkle back in your eyes. And to me, I know we can talk about all these medical, different things, HbA1c, hypertension, whatever, but it's the sparkle of life back in your eyes that, to me, in many ways, is the most thrilling thing as a health practitioner.
Yeah, I think mentally, that's another benefit is I was suffering from things, and I know you talked about the metabolic syndrome being another driver if it goes out of kilter for things like dementia, and I think that the high blood pressure and the way I was living was affecting my brain. It was affecting my concentration, my memory, and I feel that I've been through hell in terms of stress and pressure over the last few weeks, because essentially, like thousands of businesses across the UK and like your own business, everything was trashed. So I've coped with that a lot better, and I have done a lot of live interviews with community groups where I've had to literally do 15-minute sessions and live newscasting where there's no auto cue, and my mind has been pin sharp. I've been able to ad lib and work under pressure. So the mental element, that I think when you talk about the sparkle in your eyes, the brain is part of the body. So I think it has done justice to that.
I've seen this a lot with clients where they start off looking really exhausted, and you can see they're struggling. And within sort of a month, 6 weeks, it's like they've had fresh life breathed into their bodies. And it's a kind of holistic approach. To me, that's kind of thrilling. Reinvigoration. It's almost like like they've rediscovered their youth and their enthusiasm, and everything's improved. Metabolic syndrome, at its, I suppose, most fundamental, is inflammation. And in the NHS, we treat all these diseases separately: the blood pressure, the lipids, the dementia, the cancer. They're all treated separately because they have separate symptoms. But there is a common link between all of these things, a lifestyle-related link of inflammation. And everything you've described to me, like the aches and pains that your wife isn't suffering, or the psoriasis that's resolved, or the flaky skin, there's a common inflammatory link. And one of the points of the interventions that I make is to reduce levels of inflammation, and you get all these kind of benefits.
Yeah. And I think just looking at it from a chart point of view, I don't think I've got the full benefits yet, and we're having this discussion about a possible extension and goals.
Yeah.
But if I just flick to the chart, let me see if I can bring it up to screen. Good. Okay. So I've actually started charting week 11, but week 10 is the one we're on about.
Yep.
So we can see on blood pressure, the average is almost, and I color-coded things, if we go up here, so it's just bordering on elevated normal,
Yep.
but still, still, I've still got a lot of work to do, I guess, to get to where I want to be.
Just on that, John, it's very, very rare that you can control hypertension, raise blood pressure with one drug, right? And we've managed to control your blood pressure with one drug at the lowest dose. I mean, that's a stunning result in its own, because your blood pressure wasn't mildly raised, it was, dangerously high.
Well, let's just look at it. I mean, that's where it was, and we'd had some ridiculously high figures. I mean, that's a 200 over 11, and I recorded that on hospital tests about 4 or 5 times. So that wasn't just a faulty blood pressure meter. That's where I was, where you were sort of prodding me to get myself seen to.
Yeah. The expectation with someone at that level of blood pressure would be you'd be on the maximum dose of at least 2 agents, and probably on a third at a lower dose to control it.
Yeah.
And the fact that we've managed to control your blood pressure with only one therapeutic agent, and it was the first one that we tried, and at the lowest dose is an incredible result. And I think there's every reason to think that if you continue in your current path, we're going to get you off completely.
That's my hope, and I think when we talk about an extension, I think that would be the goal over the next few weeks. Just looking at the weight, I've lost 10 kilos in 8 weeks. Yeah. That was the waist size. That's gone down as of today. It's down to about 102. So I'm continuing, and I've actually gone sub 90 now as weight. I actually started to hover around that on the 10th. The other thing I'm really pleased about is this visceral fat, but it does take you said that would shift quickly, but to me it shifts slowly. But I had a big gain because when I started, I was on, I think it was 19. Let's just double check. Yeah. So I was on 19 at the very beginning. But that seems, I lost a lot suddenly. And you had my blood results, because I had been a drinker before that, and I had a very good Christmas, enjoying myself. But what's your thoughts in terms of the visceral fat? Because I've got to get that down to below 12 in order to be healthy.
Yeah. Remember, visceral fat is the fat around your organs, but the most important fat is the fat in your liver. And your tests show that you've got fatty liver. And that fat drains first. So in order of loss, it's the fatty liver fat that goes, then the visceral fat, then the other fat. So we're probably at the point now where it's maybe more cosmetic than medical. And I'm all, in favour of you continuing, because I want to get you not just below the safe zone, but I want to get you well into the safe zone, because everyone drifts a bit and no one leads a perfect life. So I'm trying to create a margin for error that gives you a little bit to play with, rather than feeling you've got to lead your life on a sort of knife's edge of perfection, which no one can do. If you keep going as you are, it will absolutely work. And remember, we've only used about half our strategies to date. There are lots of little tweaks and things that we haven't tried, because, as you know, I go for the low-hanging fruit first, and for you that was probably sleep, which we haven't discussed. And then the series of structured interventions, and there's lots of other tweaks we haven't even thought or discussed about yet. So if you get to the point where you've got goals that you haven't achieved, and the current strategy isn't working, or it's kind of plateaued, there's loads more for us to go at.
Okay, so I think the final thing I'd like to say to anybody that's watching this is that I did look around, because I knew my health was not right, And when I started to learn what you were doing, I looked at a lot of the stuff that's available, NHS, Dr. Michael Mosley. The thing about this is I don't think those work on their own. And what I can see is that with someone like myself, who was a typical sort of post-50-year-old business person, is we've got two problems. One is not having the time and knowledge to change properly, because there's an awful lot to understand, so that your program is all about having a coach and a mentor. And you've spotted things which I would not have noticed or questioned, and I could have actually damaged myself if I'd tried too quickly to, for example, exercise when I had hypertension and stuff like that. So, you know, I think that that's very important. The second one is that the sorts of people that you're dealing with, and I don't think this is just business people, but particularly men, we're very stubborn. Also, I've tried to talk to other business people about the benefits, and they come up with keto, or they come up with this, or they come up with that. And even Dr. Mosley's course is all, he can't do the consultations that you're doing. So how the hell can this program reach more people? Because there's only one Graham Phillips at the moment.
So we do have a cunning plan, Baldrick. As you know, I've got other people working with me, so I can expand as we need to. I can expand the number of practitioners. The second is the use of technology. So we're using Zoom, but I've always used social media in whichever way that works for people. And I've got clients in other parts of this country and other parts of the world who I've never face-to-face met. So technology means that you can have that conversation at any part of the world at any time to suit an individual. And then we've just been given a huge government grant to scale it. So what we're hoping to do is to go through apps development, big data, all that kind of AI stuff. So we'll be able to give people a sort of a self-serve version of Prolongevity, and they'll be able to buy, because it's an expensive thing for people, not everyone can afford the amount of money we're talking about. So we're trying to find ways to, over the next 2 to 3 years, to develop the technology so that we can provide this, a percentage of the support, or because it's never the same as a face-to-face, but a good measure of that support for people who couldn't afford the full service, to get sort of 60 or 70% of the benefits. So all of that's something we're working on in the background.
Okay, I think actually on that point, you say expensive. When I looked at the cost, I don't think it is expensive, because I think it's in line with paying for a personal coach at a gym. I mean, there's an issue over the BAME, the Black, Asian, minority and ethnic groups are coming, and we know that there's a very strong link between the types of diet and diabetes for that group. So there's I think post this apocalyptic scenario that we're in right now, there's a need for that kind of national program. But will the government listen? Because the Boris that I knew just weeks before this crisis hit backed the food industry, didn't want to heavily alter the way that diets were being affected by the sort of cheap carbohydrates, and said just get on your bike and exercise it off.
A lot of people believe that. I think there are two issues. One is that because in this country, we have the incredible benefit of the NHS, and I would never knock the NHS. When you look at what the NHS is doing at the moment, my God, are we lucky to have it. But the problem with our approach is we expect healthcare to be free and beer to be expensive. So we're happy to invest in a craft beer, but we don't spend any money on our health. So I think there's an argument that says people need to think really hard. Is an expensive beer, the cost of expensive beer over a year would pay for this course? Are you prepared to make that investment in yourself? But I think there's also a broader argument, which Matt Hancock actually started before all the coronavirus hit, which is we invest huge sums in the NHS, treating symptoms and treating people when they get unwell, and almost nothing about preventive public health. And for my entire professional life, I've always wanted to do something, put public health prevention front and center. And, the food industry we're all paying the price for the food industry, and we pick up the price in the NHS. And I think there needs to be a complete realignment, particularly post-COVID, because what we can clearly see is the people who get bad outcomes from COVID, the first factor is age, and the second factor has got to do with metabolic syndrome and weight. And people think it's about the weight, but it actually isn't the weight. It's whether you've got metabolic syndrome, so whether you've got raised cholesterol, raised blood sugar, raised insulin, and all the other parts of metabolic syndrome make you prone to it. So there's a very, very strong argument now that we need to rethink the relationship between acute care and preventive care and where our investment should be.
Okay, so I totally agree with that, and I hope that you get the backing to roll out a real change in the nation's view on what will be a lifestyle change that will prevent not just the coronavirus killing people, but all of the other killer diseases. And I think that, you know, that can save the sorts of money that is going to be needed now to rescue the economy. So,
Yep.
you know, it's a very simple business case from where I'm sat, but I think there is going to be a lot of challenges out there, because I know I was listening to Radio 5 and it was literally a sponsored program by Kellogg's. You know, there'll be a lot of advocates for the alternatives. You know, you've had that chap that owns JD Wetherspoon trying to make a case for keeping those open just days before the lockdown. So you've got a lot of very wrong views. Anyway, we can't cure world hunger and coronavirus immediately.
We can try.
We've agreed to continue this because I think this has been quite an interesting clinical experiment to take, you know, I would say a cynical, stubborn, headstrong, middle-aged man. And
is
actually,
that you or me?
Well, yeah, but you were right. I was wrong. That was the difference. And what we've got to do now is extend the program and see, like you were saying, how you can put me in an absolutely great mode, you know, where every factor is on song for the longest and best possible life, where I don't end up sucking out of a straw half blind. So how long do you think that will take? Let's set some goals. I'm prepared to keep going until we hit that target, but what's the plan ahead?
Well, that's driven by you primarily. So you're now out of the danger zone. You're on a good path. We've discussed most things. What are your personal goals going forward? Because really at this point, I'm happy for you to say, you know, the things that I was really, really urgently concerned about, we've addressed. I would obviously don't want to see you drift back, but what do you want out of this? And what kind of timescale would you like to set? And then we can tailor and tweak the program accordingly.
Okay, so I think that what I would like to do is to get minus 10% safe. So if you took, for example, the visceral fat, for me that would be a target of 12 to get to past the the risk point. So that maybe the target there would be 10.5. The same for BMI, the same for blood pressure. So I think that would probably take the same length of time again. And the reason I think I can be more ambitious is that I've now got the beginnings of fitness coming back like I've not had in maybe over 10 years. So, you know, I'll be out there cycling to work. I'll be keeping with the program. So I think, you know, trying to do that in another 8 weeks would be doable. I might need a few more tips and tricks from you in terms of little things I can do to boost it. I might try fasting, for example. You know,
that would definitely be one of my strategies. Fasting is very, very profound and it acts very, very quickly. But if I say to someone on day one fast, they'll look at me like I'm going to die. You've got to get people into a sort of metabolic state where their body's used to fat burning first. That's my strategy, because otherwise it becomes unsustainable. Fasting would be a good strategy for you.
Right.
There are all sorts of things we can do about what you eat, when you eat, how you eat. We haven't explored everything by any means yet. It's kind of, there are options. The other point is this: the technology, the devices are quite expensive. Now, you may well be at a point where we don't need to wear the device all the time. We can save costs, and we can reduce the cost to you of the service by reducing or using the technology, not all the time, but some of the time, and put it on every 6 months. And then that cost goes away straight away, and just continue to monitor. Because if everything else is going in the right direction, do we still need to continue with the CGM? Arguably not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take your advice on that. I think we obviously have now an understanding. I think what I have learned, though, is there's still a huge amount of experimentation on diet. So I've now made about 5 or 6 different types of low carb bread. They've all been very successful, but you know, it's having that ability just to check the glycemic reaction. And also I found it quite useful. I've noticed I've had hypos where I've been doing very strenuous exercise. You know, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think I am probably going to stay with the monitoring for another 4 or 5 weeks. But
No
I don't
problem.
think the monitor's too expensive. You know, and you can purchase them on Amazon, etc. But and obviously, I think the most important thing is the consultation. It's understanding all of the measurements in their totality, and that's where I think Prolongevity wins hands down over just buying a book or joining a group.
Yeah, but let's face it, everyone's got a blood pressure monitor at home, and blood pressure's not going down. Lots of people have got Fitbits. If Fitbit was going to save the world, it would have done it by now. It's not working, and I'm quite convinced it's a combination of technology and coaching that makes the difference.
Yeah. Good. Well, on that note, I think we've had a really good review. How regularly do you want me to do these vlogs? Every 2 weeks? Every week? What?
Yes, I kind of feel that we could go every 2 weeks now.
Okay.
Because it's less onerous for you, and your rate of change. I mean, you won't maintain the same rate of change going forward. I mean, your rate of change has been astonishing. It would be unrealistic to expect to continue the weight loss at the same rate. And I think, if I'm honest, 8 weeks is a bit ambitious. I would say more 12 to 16 weeks, which in a lifetime is a short period. But I'm absolutely confident that we can get you to exactly where you want to go. And we'll just keep making little tweaks and changes to get you there.
Okay. Thank you very much. I did say in one of the videos, I think it was week 3, that you'd rescued my life, and you genuinely have. So I'll be around to annoy you for a bit longer now.
Good.
And hopefully...
I never cut off with my clients. That we always maintain a level of contact, so that's as it should be.
Yeah, and joking aside, I think you are, you know, you're one of the people, one of the more profound people I've met over my few decades on planet Earth, and whatever I can do to support you, you know, you just ask and I'll do my best. I'm now an evangelist for Prolongevity.
Fear me both. Fear me both. All right, John, you take care.
Okay. All right. Bye, Graham.
Bye, John.